This week, we witnessed something profoundly unsettling. On Christmas Day, 2025, vast regions of Texas experienced their warmest December 25th in recorded history. People opened windows in 80-degree heat. Not in summer, on Christmas morning, while families and children broke secular temperature records, some dating back over a century. Evacuation orders were being issued in Southern California, where atmospheric rivers transformed highways into torrents. This wasn't two separate weather events. This was the sound of a system breaking. The jet stream, that river of high-altitude wind that governs our weather, had been stretched so violently that it snapped. And what we witnessed was the aftermath. A continental-scale whiplash where the map of America was torn in half. One side drowning, the other side burning in winter heat. You felt it, didn't you? That cognitive dissonance when you checked the forecast. That unease that something fundamental had shifted. You weren't imagining it. The baseline has moved. And what's terrifying isn't the heat or the flood alone. It's the velocity of the oscillation. From blizzard to tropical heat in 10 days. The atmosphere became a whip, and we felt the crack. The instinct, of course, is to normalize this. Weather has always been unpredictable. It's just El Niño. Remember that weird winter in the 80s? These are the things we tell ourselves because chaos without pattern is unbearable to the human mind. We need the illusion of randomness, the comfort of historical precedent. But here's the problem with that comfort. The math doesn't support it. When you break hundreds of temperature records in a single week, secular records, some dating back over a century, you're no longer in the realm of normal variance. When a 500-year storm becomes a recurring event, probability itself has been corrupted. The dice are loaded now. And the pattern wasn't random at all. It was precise, brutally precise. While the Northeast experienced what looked like a classic winter storm on December 13th, the kind that grounds 1,000 flights and accumulates a foot of snow, something was already shifting. By December 17th, a bomb cyclone in the Central Plains acted as a mechanical switch, locking the atmosphere into an extreme configuration that would define the rest of the month. Let me show you what happened. On December 17th, a low-pressure system over the Central Plains underwent what meteorologists call bombogenesis, a pressure drop so rapid and violent that it generated winds of 145 miles per hour in Wyoming. Non-convective winds, not from a tornado, from the sheer pressure gradient of the atmosphere trying to equalize itself. This wasn't just a storm, it was a pattern engine. That bomb cyclone locked the jet stream into what's called an extreme meridional flow, a configuration where the jet, instead of flowing west to east like a river, contorts into massive north-south waves. Imagine a taut rope suddenly whipped with tremendous force. It doesn't break cleanly. It oscillates violently, creating peaks and valleys. But here's what makes this configuration increasingly common. The rope itself has lost tension. Arctic amplification, the phenomenon where the Arctic is warming up to 4 times faster than the equator, is weakening the temperature gradient that keeps the jet stream tight and fast. When the difference between polar and tropical air diminishes, the jet slows down and meanders, like a river that loses its current and begins to snake lazily across the landscape. Except this isn't lazy. A slow, wavy jet creates massive, persistent loops that can lock weather patterns in place for weeks. In the valleys, the troughs, the jet dives deep into the Pacific, acting like a conveyor belt that scoops up tropical moisture and hurls it against the California mountains. Atmospheric river after atmospheric river. 3 meters of snow in the Sierra Nevada. Flood risk rated at the maximum level, 4 out of 4 in Los Angeles. And simultaneously, to compensate for that dive, the rope arches violently northward over the central United States, creating what's called a blocking ridge. This curvature allowed subtropical air from the Gulf of Mexico to surge freely all the way to the Canadian border, forming a heat dome that prevented any Arctic air from entering. Same rope, same system, just twisted to an extreme and held there by a jet stream that had lost the speed to move on. Now here's where the physics becomes terrifying in its simplicity. Warmer air holds more water vapor before it saturates. This isn't speculation, it's thermodynamics. The Clausius-Clapeyron equation tells us that for every degree Celsius of warming, the atmosphere can hold about 7% more moisture. Think of the atmosphere as a sponge. Heat the sponge, and its capacity expands. So when an atmospheric river, already a massive tongue of tropical moisture, forms in a warmer ocean and warmer atmosphere, it's not carrying the historical baseline of water. It's carrying an artificially expanded reservoir. And when that river collided with the California mountains and was forced upward, cooling and condensing rapidly, it didn't produce rain. It produced a deluge. The infrastructure, the drainage systems, the levees, the urban planning, was all designed for a climate that no longer exists. A 500-year storm was supposed to occur once in 5 centuries. When it becomes a recurring event, the disaster isn't caused by the rain itself. It's caused by the obsolescence of human engineering in the face of a fundamentally altered system. Meanwhile, on the other side of that whip, the heat dome over Texas wasn't benign. It was deceptive. The tranquility of 80-degree Christmas weather was maintained by the same mechanism that was drowning California. It was a false spring, and nature responded. Plants in Oklahoma and Texas broke dormancy, buds opening, leaves unfurling, because the temperature signal told them it was March, but it was December. And when the inevitable cold returns, which is exactly what's happening now as December closes, those plants will die. This is what ecologists call a phenological disruption. The synchronization between species, between plants and their pollinators, between prey and predator, between temperature and biological readiness, is being shattered. The calendar says one thing, the thermometer says another, and life caught in between makes fatal mistakes. And it's not just the flora. There's a psychological dimension to this that we haven't fully reckoned with. The feeling that the seasons themselves have become unreliable, that winter forgot to appear, that the fundamental rhythms we've oriented our lives around for millennia are now negotiable. This is what Wallace Wells calls the cascade effect. One system failure triggers another, which triggers another. The heat dome created unexpected demand for air conditioning in December, straining power grids designed for winter loads. The atmospheric rivers closed roads and airports in California, creating a domino effect that canceled flights in cities with perfect weather because planes and crews were trapped. Emergency services overwhelmed by floods in the West couldn't be redeployed to help with cold emergencies in the North when the pattern finally breaks. The disaster wasn't one event, it was the collapse of interconnected systems under simultaneous, contradictory stresses. And now as December closes, the bill is coming due. A powerful cold front is sweeping across the country, breaking the heat dome with brutal efficiency. Models indicate a thermal crash so violent that cities basking in 80-degree heat could face freezing wind chills within 24 hours. The false spring is ending with killing frost, and the psychological whiplash mirrors the meteorological one. But here's what we need to sit with. There is no return to normal weather. The new baseline isn't stability at a higher temperature, it's radical instability. Weather whiplash. The violence of the oscillation is the signature of a climate system with more energy in it, trying to redistribute heat across a planet that's been artificially loaded with thermal imbalance. The weakened jet stream, robbed of its tension by Arctic amplification, will continue to meander and lock into these extreme configurations. What we witnessed in December 2025 isn't an anomaly, it's a preview. So what do we do with this knowledge? Because that's the question that haunts every conversation about climate now. If the dice are loaded, if the baseline has shifted, if the infrastructure we depend on was built for a world that no longer exists, what is the action that isn't paralysis or denial? The answer isn't technological salvation. It's not a solar panel on your roof or an electric car in your driveway, as valuable as those things are. The answer is systemic, and it begins with a refusal to let the spectacle of the crisis distract us from its structure. Climate adaptation isn't about individual virtue. It's about collective resilience. It's about understanding that the communities hit first and hardest are the ones with the least resources to recover. Climate justice isn't a moral luxury, it's infrastructural necessity. When a city's poor neighborhoods flood because they were built on floodplains no one else wanted, the failure cascades upward. You can't fortify half a city. Real adaptation happens in the boring meetings no one attends. The zoning boards, the water management districts, the city councils that decide where development happens and how drainage is managed. The future isn't being decided in international summits, it's being decided in your municipality. And most of us don't even know the names of the people making those decisions. The anxiety you feel when you see these reports, that's not pathology, that's lucidity. You're paying attention. The question is whether you metabolize that attention into action or let it ferment into despair. December 2025 will be remembered not as a month of winter, but as the month the weather snapped. The sound you heard, that cognitive crack, was the sound of a system breaking under the weight of imbalances we created and can no longer ignore. The snap was the alert. What we do after hearing it, that's the test. Scientific references, including works by Wallace Wells and Colbert, are linked in the description below. This video is part of the playlist The Nature of Reality, Science, Physics, and the Cosmos. New videos every Thursday and Sunday.